Hey listeners, Mark here with another one of our round the club trips this off-season, looking back at 2018 and ahead to 2019. This time we're going to talk Catalans Dragons, and I've got our friend James, who joined us after the spectacular Challenge Cup win. He's back to talk more Catalan Dragons, so that's great. James, of course, runs the UK CatalansDragons.blogspot.com website, where you can check out more of his thoughts. And just to tip your heads on this one, we had some connection problems at the end, so we trail off a little bit when we are looking forward to 2019, so apologies for that. We were going to talk a little bit about the French domestic scene with James. We'll try and pick that up later on during this off-season to catch up on what's going on there and some of the interesting signings and shifts in the dynamics there. But I hope you enjoy listening to James recap 2018, and then we look ahead to 2019. Right, so to run through the 2018 season for me for the Catalan Dragons, we've got returning to the show after a very popular first appearance in the summer. It's James Warren, and welcome back to the show, James.
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, and we're going to get to talk a little bit about that Challenge Cup final again as we go through what happened in 2018. But we'll start by, I'll just recap the pre-season prediction I made. I picked Catalan to finish 8th. I didn't expect a cup run. The final result was 7th, but obviously a cup run resulting in victory at Wembley. And before we talk to you a bit more about what went on, James, we just had one other fan review in from Catalans fans when we did our end of season polls. So Malcar Matias said, "Poor 7th isn't much to sing about. Playoffs should be absolute minimum with the spend we got. So mince the coach if he fails. We should have got much closer to the grand final. Champions next year, I reckon. By the way, cup was nice though." So.
That's a fair assessment, I think. That's a fair assessment.
Well, if he didn't have the by the way at the end, I'd think, did he watch the same season that we did? But maybe that starts with where we should start with the season, which is back at the beginning, and we'll go back to there because then it gets happier after that. But it was a horror start.
Yeah, sure.
It was a horror start, James.
Yeah, yes, and I think what the guy said is dead right, that if they hadn't won the cup, or if that York game that could have gone either way at Easter hadn't gone their way, I think McNamara probably would have been toast. We kind of the cup's glossed over that period, sort of March, April time, where I think every single week there was some sort of speculation, some sort of article or podcast or something that seemed to indicate that he could be on his bike. And to be honest, at that time, if he'd have got sacked before, if he'd have got sacked after that terrible result and display at Salford on Good Friday, it wouldn't have been a surprise, nor, in my opinion, would it have been the wrong decision, because they were terrible. And I've seen people say, this winter that the French national team should treat the World Cup qualifiers with more respect and the Dragons players should play. But, they started the season on their knees last year as a result of actually playing in a World Cup and actually having had a full season and having been in £1 million game. So maybe I'm cutting Mr. McNamara a little bit of slack by saying that, he did, and I remember him saying on a number of media outlets that they would start the season slow. And Well, he was true to his word, wasn't he?
He was. Just two wins from the first 11 games. That run featured 2 nillings and 3 games where 40 or more points were shipped in. So it wouldn't have shocked anyone at all, would it, if he had been fired? No. I think we all made plenty of jokes about it throughout that first 3 months of the season, because it was. Even if he'd predicted that it was going to be a slow start, James, that was way above and beyond what a slow start is. But then the cup run started.
Absolutely.
So then there was
the
scratchy
and I think that saved him, didn't it?
Yeah, the scratchy win over York. So was that quite simply the turning point?
No, but yes, it was, because they showed that they knew how to win.
I mean, that week,
I suppose
Drinkwater signed, didn't he? That week.
Yeah, that's true. He hit the ground running, didn't he?
6 wins from 7 in League and Cup came after he came in, and during that time, Kenny Edwards joined the club too, and maybe some of the other players started to find some form or fitness that they'd lacked at the start of the season as well. So confidence was rising.
The cynics would say the weather warmed up, wasn't it? And you kind of compare. I kind of compared the two Castleford away performances. The one in the league where they had 40 put on them and got nilled, and it was the end of the world. And then the Super 8s one where it was just after the cup final win. They still got more or less 40 points put on them, but they were seen as heroes. But that's kind of how a season can develop.
Yeah.
I mean, the York win, it was. They got away in the last sort of quarter of the game, and it was the players, the experienced players like Bird and people like that got them over the line. But even the week after that, they still went to Salford in the driving rain on Good Friday, and that was another 40-point beating, I think, if my memory serves me right. And then the Easter Monday, they were at home to Huddersfield. The sun was out. There was a bit of warmth in the air. They beat Huddersfield, and then that run kind of seemed to kick in. And I don't quite know how, and I don't know whether the coaching staff even know how and why that transformation happened. It can't just be warmer weather and harder pitches, although, the general, they're the Arsenal of rugby league, aren't they? Catalans, when the pitches are good, and the teams are weak, they're flat track bullies. But it'll be interesting to see next year, because they've got to hit the ground running and they've got to do it week in and week out. And there's not been, apart from Trent Robinson, there's not really been a Catalans coach that's been able to consistently get them to perform week in, week out. They seem to go in these little bursts where they win 5 or 6 games and blow teams away. And then as soon as they have a defeat, they go and lose 3 or 4 on the bounce. And that's where I can see what the other guy was saying. It's really ridiculous when you've won the first competition in the club's history to say, I'm not sure about that coach. But there's a reason why the top clubs in England didn't take him when he left the England job. And has Steve McNamara a grand final winning coach? Not for me. But he proved me wrong last year. So
after that,
that's his challenge.
Yeah, after that sort of return to form kind of spell with the good run in the League Cup, then it was in and out a little bit with the cup games getting the focus. But in the semi-final, you talked about being in the right stage, in the right weather, in the right conditions. Catalan can really bully anyone. That day, they did something to St Helens that no team has done all season to that point, with the emphatic 35-16 win in Bolton. So you must have started to believe on that afternoon.
Yeah. I believed we'd got to the final, but I'm naturally cynical, so not much after that. No, you're right. And that first half was among the best performances that Catalans have had. And unfortunately, and I do know a few St Helens fans who never thank me for reminding them, when Catalans put in a big result, quite often it's against St Helens. We all think of the Scott Giroud touchline kick and other really good performances, and so we do seem to save it for them. But yeah, on the day we were fitter, faster, we executed better, we took our chances, the running was stronger, and some of the stuff that hadn't happened all season, it was almost like they started to think, we can win this, and obviously history's proved them right. But I think they kind of liked having the neutrals with them as well.
Yeah.
I think that worked in the club's favour as well.
I mean, and who cares that then there was that run of a couple of really heavy defeats to Warrington and Wigan, because between they became between the semi-final and the final, and at the final there was the win over Warrington at Wembley. So just we'll flash back a little bit then to that day, and you say you're the skeptic, you say you kind of don't necessarily believe beyond the result that you see. Any stage in that game, did you believe it was in hand? Because I thought Catalan had quite an impressive and imposing performance again in that game, even if it wasn't as big a scoreline.
I remember this question last time, and I said no, so I've got to be consistent and say no again. No, I didn't. And watching it back, even, and I think anyone, when you're engaged in it as a supporter of a team, you always look for what could go. Maybe that's because my football team's Weymouth and they're dreadful, but I kind of, even when they're 3 or 4-0 up, I still think, the floodlight might fail or something like that. And I think that was the day. You almost felt it was too good to be true, maybe. And the start that they had with the Tierney try was absolutely what any cup final needs, is an early score. Bit of controversy of their disallowed try, and then the try they did score before half time, whether that should have been. But the Dragons scored key points in the game. And it was only really that last 10 minutes when they did finally start to run out of steam that you maybe thought, no, it's Warrington, isn't it? And they were kind of relentless. But I suppose the Ben Westwood knock on and that catch under his own sticks by Casti, who, really the fullback should be clearing that up and coming round and in to take that catch. But he seemed to jump about 15 feet off the floor to take that sort of, I'm sure it was a fifth tackle kick. Under the post,
it was a
try and bobble around, and that was the
not
best
pass
play of the
moment.
season.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it was unbelievable, And yeah, I mean, at that point you start, but yeah, I think my hangover's just about gone now.
Well, I tell you what, we won't talk about any of the other games that happened after that because who really cares? That was where the season finished for the Catalans.
It's hard work maintaining a website on that. That is for sure. We tried to, but well, you say they don't care, but if we're suggesting that Catalans should and could sustain, a season, surely, after big games, they should be mentally and physically able to get up for the next big game. If they are going to get a run to Old Trafford, they can't afford to get in the top four, clock off, and then suddenly pick their form up again. So, while you're dead right, it didn't matter. But
that's for next time. We'll worry about that for next time, James. Come on, have some bloody joy. You won the Challenge Cup.
I know, and I am very joyous. Trust me, I'm very joyous. But it's a standard thing, isn't it? And you want them to replicate what is going to make them successful. And yeah, well, you never know. Maybe the signings will give them that sort of attitude and approach.
We'll get to 2019 in a little while. Just one more thing I want you to touch on for 2018. I just want you to sort of sum up maybe who you think were the best players for the Dragons over the last season. Maybe your highlight moments, and if there was any players that surprised you and were a lot better than you were expecting.
Drinkwater would be probably the one who surprised me. His previous spells with London and Lee, I believe it was, he didn't tend to get the best sort of publicity or ratings, or
he got relegated twice, didn't he, in his two previous?
Yeah, exactly. Right. He looked job on for 3 times lucky, didn't he? But he came in, he turned them around. I'm disappointed, like most fans, that there wasn't a way that they could find to keep him, but that's up to the boss. He's made that decision. He was fantastic. Casti was exemplary, led from the front. I thought Gigo, when he came back, he needed to hit the ground running, and maybe in touching on the fact that they picked up at Easter, that was around the time he finally got his ban sorted, and he was back
to fitness and stuff by then, wasn't he? You're right, yeah. That was a difference, mate. And they started to play him at fullback again by then. That was the weird thing with Catalans' start to the season, wasn't it? That they didn't necessarily pick the players in the position that was going to get the best for the team. They were, I don't know why. It was a bit strange, but it found a way, and Gigo getting fit enough to play at fullback was probably one of those key elements.
Yeah, I felt a bit sorry for David Mead, to be honest, because he, I think that if Catalans had played the way that historically they played, where they like to run the ball and try and get, defensive lines all, jumbled up, and he would have scored, loads of tries in that sort of side. But they actually started to tighten up a bit and become less flamboyant, shall we say, and a little bit more structured in how they play. And I think that maybe stopped Mead from, maybe showing what we'd hoped to see from him based on his World Cup. But, he looked strong. He got a hat-trick, didn't he, on the last day against Huddersfield. So fingers crossed he's all right for, next season he'll fit in. But they seem to have even with no Josh Drinkwater, we seem to have quite a lot of players vying for a back position. But probably my highlight of the year was me. Go on.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say my highlight of the year was meeting Greg Bird. And, the guy's got plenty of reputation and all of the stuff that precedes him. But we met him when we were over there, and, he had time to stop and have a chat. He had a chat, post for a picture with my kids who they love any Catalans player. And, you think, wow, you've just been running around for 80 minutes getting beaten all over the park, and you're actually, I'm sure you've got other priorities rather than standing and talking to